Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bonnie and I'm the Farmhouse Witch. And today we're going to be talking about my book recommendations for beginner witches. Now you can read these at any level. This is just something that I've been requested to do throughout my time here on YouTube, and it's also very subjective. This is just my little corner of the internet where I'm posting my opinion, and obviously people have asked for that, so this is what this video is. If you have different opinions on the books I'm talking about or books that you think are better, you are obviously free to post that in the comment section below. Also, when people have come to me in the past and they've asked for beginner book recommendations because they're just starting, I always feel like it's kind of an ambiguous question, because in the witchcraft space and in the occult space there are so many topics and so many things to read about and learn about, and unless I know you on a personal level, it's very, and like know what you're interested in, it's very hard for me to tailor my book recommendations towards you. So I just picked my top 5 books that I felt like covered a variety of topics and can give you guys a good outlay of the land. Also, I just want to address this before we actually get into the video. I did not pick your typical run-of-the-mill introduction witchy books for this video, just because I feel like you're going to use those maybe once, maybe twice, but once you move on, you're probably not going to reference those very much. And because of that, the books that I picked are books you can read at any point in your craft and things that you can continue to reference. That way you're not wasting your money and you are actually using that book in your practice. And while some of the books that I'm going to show you today do have a short little section on the beginnings of witchcraft, you know, what is magic, how do you dispose of a spell, how does magic work, and those beginner-like topics, those sections are very short and don't encompass the whole book. Anyways, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the video. The first book that I want to show you guys is the Grimoire for the Green Witch, and this is a complete book of shadows by 𝑀𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒔𝒔. Now, hands down, if you asked me to pick my favorite book from today's list, it would be this one. I really can't recommend this book enough, just because nowadays it's very rare, I feel like, that we actually get a copy of a grimoire or a book of shadows. Obviously, these are very personal documents, and 𝑀𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒔𝒔 herself, she is a traditional witch. I believe she's a 3rd generation witch. So this book encompasses so much wisdom, and it also has a great mixture of folk magic and ritualistic magic. So I'm gonna flip to our table of contents just to show you how it's broken up really quick. So the first section of the Book of Shadows focuses on ritualistic and ceremonial magic. So in that, she teaches you how to cast a circle, how to close a circle. There's rituals for your path dedication, there's hand fasting rituals, there's Sabbath rituals. I mean, anything that you can think of, it's probably in that section if it has to do with ritual or ceremonial type magic. And then the second part of the book is more focused towards the mundane and folk magic, which I really appreciate. Obviously, I'm not going to show you every single page, but I do want to show you some of the highlights within this book. Obviously, she does give a little bit of an introduction to herself and her path, and she does tend to follow under the mindset of the rule of 3 and the Wiccan Rede. And if you're not into that, obviously you don't have to take that to heart. I mean, this book is not forcing you to believe everything she believes. You can just use this book as a reference guide. Within the ritual section, she has a lot of fundamental basics. So she has how to ground and center, she has your altar tool. She also has an explanation for what each altar tool does. She gives you an example of some altar arrangements and layouts. She also has a section for craft terms, and this is a dictionary section. So if there's a term you're not familiar with, then you can go in here and look it up. Some of my favorite rituals within this section are just her simple consecration rituals. So she has a ritual where you can consecrate your altar tools, and also a ritual to consecrate deity statues. Also, a quick note, after each chapter, she does have a little section where you can go in and write your own ritual notes. She has SBAT rituals, and those are just your full moon and new moon rituals. She also has a few for the dark moon. She has your Sabbath rituals, and she does give you correspondences for each Sabbath, things that you can do and ways you can celebrate. And chapter 5 is recitations. So these are like songs and poems that you can add to your own rituals, which I think is very unique. And chapter 7, she has a lot of meditations, and this is the chapter that ends the ritualistic section of her Book of Shadows. I will say her meditations are very detailed, and I find them to be very helpful. Now, if you're someone who isn't really going to delve into the ritualistic aspect of witchcraft, in the occult space, but you want to focus on folk magic, then this part of the book is going to be what you want to focus on. Within these sections, she has a lot of different correspondences. So again, I'm not going to be able to show you everything, but she has very helpful information. So she has the witch's sigil wheel, which is obviously helpful if you're into sigils. She does go over color magic, daily influences. There's a section in here for crystals, crystal programming. She goes over properties of trees and shrubs. She has all of the zodiac signs within here. One of my favorite parts about this book when it comes to herbal correspondences is that she has an alphabetical list for herbal correspondences, but she also has a list within this section that goes by purpose. So if you're doing something for luck, then you could go to that section and look at the correspondences that are listed under that intention, which I think is very helpful. She also has quite a few of these quick spell charts, which are amazing. So for example, if you're looking at this chart and you wanted to do a spell for change, well, then you could go down here and look and go, oh, my moon phase, if I'm wanting to work with a moon, would be a waning moon. My colors that I should work with would be dark blue, yellow, and white. The elements I can work with are fire and water. The days that would work with this, and the planets, the numbers, and so forth. So these are very helpful, and I want to say she has like 5 or 6 sprinkled throughout the book. Of course, she has a section for your basic spells. She does additionally have a section for incense, teas, baths, and oils. And she has a crafting section. It's rather short, but she does give you some crafts that you can make for your own practice. Chapter 11 is devoted to divination, which I think is just awesome because typically if you want to learn a form of divination, say you're choosing tarot, if you're choosing tarot, most introductory witchcraft books are not going to cover that. You'll probably have to pick up a book that's dedicated to tarot. Not if you buy this book though, because she gives you a full guide to tarot, and she goes through every card from the major arcana to the minor arcana. She gives you the meanings, she tells you ways that you can practice and use your intuition, which is just great. And she covers other forms of divination as well, like pendulums and black mirror scrying and runes. I'm not going to say they're all as detailed as tarot cards, but nevertheless, this book really encompasses so much, which is why I picked it as my #1, because whether you want a guide to spell work, or whether you want to learn tarot, or even delve into ritualistic practices, this will be the book for you because it literally guides you through everything. I've had this book forever, and you can probably tell because my copy is pretty dinged up. But overall, this is just such a great book, and even though I am more advanced in my practice, this is something I still reference, and this is something that's even helped me develop my own Book of Shadows, so I really appreciate her work on this book. For our second book, I picked The Book of Candle Magic by Madame Pamita. She's on YouTube and Instagram. She's a fellow witch in this space. And the main reason that I picked this book is because candle magic is something that's very accessible and very approachable. So even if you're practicing in the broom closet and nobody around you knows that you're a witch, candle magic is something that's very simple and cheap and something you can do. I would argue that almost any spell can be done with a candle. Even if you are somebody who's a little more advanced in your practice, I would say that this book could still be useful to you. So it does start off with your little introduction section. She talks about tools, how to set up an altar. She even has some journaling prompts about how to create your own ethical code when it comes to witchcraft. She guides you through a lot of the basics of spell work and how to customize your own spells. There's a section in here devoted to magical words as well, whether it's writing petitions or saying things out loud. There's also a section on seals and sigils and just symbology in general. She talks to you about inscribing your candles for your work. There's a section for spell layouts, and she also has quite a few recipes within this book. I think chapter 11 also is one of my favorite sections because I do have quite a few books on candle magic, and I think maybe only one of them talks about candle reading besides this one. And is it necessary? I mean, you decide that for your own practice. I don't necessarily read my candle wax every time I do candle magic, but this guide is helpful to have when I do read my candles. In this section, she goes through and she talks about what the wax is trying to tell you if it's going a different direction, if it tunnels, etc. It is a pretty decent sized section, and besides just reading the wax, she also includes how to read the smoke or even how to read the flame. She also gives you some useful tips to create your own grimoire and to help you start recording the results of your spells so you can adjust them as you go on. And she also includes some correspondence guides, so she has one for gems, she has one for herbs, and she also has one for shells and animals. Overall, I think this book is great if you're a beginner because it does focus a little bit more on those basic elements of witchcraft, but it's also something that anybody can read and that I still find to be useful in my own practice. Book number 3 that I want to show you is the Element Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, the complete A to Z for the magical world, and this is by Judica Isles. Now, I love her. She is obviously famous for her encyclopedia style books. You have probably heard of her name before, and the copy I'm showing you right now is a companion guide for the Book of 5,000 Spells, which I will show you in a minute, but I decided to put this one first because to me, and of course this is just my opinion, I find that when you approach witchcraft, if you're very serious about learning, it's important to understand other traditions and the historical impact that witchcraft and occult has had on our traditions today. And if you're into that and you're into the history and learning about different cultures, then these reference books are gonna be the guide for you. As you can see, she covers a wide variety of topics, and the reason that she picked these to cover is because she's talking about obviously other traditions and history and really the foundations or the elements that have built witchcraft, which is why this is called the Elemental Guide to Witchcraft, because these to her are the elements that founded our practices today. In her section on animals, she does go over how different animals have been perceived through witchcraft in the occult space. She even has a section in here that focuses more on folklore or fairy tale creatures, so you know, humans transforming into vampires, humans transforming into werewolves. The next section focuses on books of magic and witchcraft that have helped shape our practices today, and you'll even probably recognize some of the names as we go through these. She does talk about a traditional book of shadows, the Witch's Almanac. She talks about grimoires, she talks about the Keys of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and Aradia, the Gospel of the Witches, and that was just me naming a few. She covers many more than what I mentioned. She has a section on botanicals. She'll give you a description of what the plant looks like or what the herb looks like, and obviously, like Belladonna here, if it is toxic, she will tell you. She'll tell you how it's been used in different traditions, and personally, I think if you're somebody who works with plant allies, knowing the history about that specific plant ally can help build that relationship and strengthen your bond. She also has a section that focuses on sacred days, and this does not just focus on the wheel of the year, which is what witches typically think of or Wiccans think of. This focuses on a wide variety of holidays that were important to different cultures. And she also talks about rituals or practices that were done on each holiday, which is helpful. She has a section for creative arts, and this might seem odd to you, but if you think about it for a second, the way that witchcraft has been portrayed in any type of media, TV, movies, comics, music, has really shaped the way that people see witchcraft in the occult space today. So within these pages, she focuses on that, and she talks about different types of art and how they have influenced people's perception of witchcraft. She has a dictionary section, so if you ever come across a term that you're not really familiar with, you can obviously reference this as a guide, and this section is pretty big, so I'm quite confident if there's a term and you don't know what it means, you can probably find it in here. She also has a pretty hefty section on gods and goddesses. Something that I want to mention very quickly though, people like to argue about the mythos when it comes to gods and goddesses, and something that's not really talked about enough, I feel like. Some cultures had little to no written records when it comes to certain gods and goddesses, and if we take for example Norse mythology, because I do work with Freya, when trying to find out information about the Norse gods and goddesses, it can be a little complicated and get a little bit hazy just because most of our information comes from the Poetic Edda, which obviously has been translated and people interpret things different ways, so just keep that in mind when you go through this section. Now she does have a section on important certain figures and folktale or mythos. She also has a section for certain spirits like fairies. Now I will caveat this by saying if you're very interested in spirits, she has a whole encyclopedia dedicated to spirits. Obviously this book just has a brief section because it's not dedicated to that topic. She also has a section for food and drink, and no, this is not just a recipe section, it's again the historical context of certain foods and certain drink. She also goes over the horned one and the devil, and I know that's probably confusing to some people because a lot of people would say, hey, we're witches. The devil is a Judeo-Christian mindset. We don't believe in their God, so why would we believe in their devil? Well, historically in traditional witchcraft and folk witchcraft, there is a sense of the devil and this horned one, so that's important to read. There's also a lot of different books I could recommend on that topic, but we're not getting into that right now. She has a section that's focused on the magical arts, and this is where she breaks down basically anything that has to do with magic. She breaks down planetary hours, color magic, candle magic, alchemy, any type of practice that you've probably heard about as it relates to witchcraft or the occult is probably listed in this section. She also goes over magical professionals, where she talks about careers in the past that have been associated with the occult space or witchcraft. For example, one of the first ones that she talks about would be the Freemasons, and then she goes into a travel guide for witches. We're not going to get into that right now. We'll go to the tool section. Again, this is just your typical list of your tools, how they're used. And then we get to what I think is probably my favorite section within this book. And this one is the Hall of Fame for Witches. And some of the names that you might recognize that she has in here are Aleister Crowley and of course Nostradamus. Those are just a few examples. Obviously she covers a ton more than that. She does touch on the topic of the witch craze and persecution of witches throughout time. And my closing remarks on this one are going to be, now is this 100% necessary? No, of course not, but I think that this is a really useful guide to have, especially when approaching the history of witchcraft and occult practices. We have made it to our fourth book, and of course, again, it's by Judika Isles. This is the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells. Now, book number 3, which I showed you before this, that one is actually the companion guide that goes with this one. And of course, this book is what it says it is. It's just a spell book. She does put a warning label in here that it's not for children, and mostly the warning label just tells you essentially that this is a compendium of different spells throughout different traditions and just different points of history. Not everything in this book is going to be safe or should be practiced today. For example, one of the spells in here suggests using rue, which rue is notorious for defending against negative energy, scrying and reversal spells, but they suggest that you grab a handful of rue and carry it in your pocket and throw it in the face of an enemy. Obviously, if you did that in today's society, that probably wouldn't turn out great for you. You might even get arrested. Also, in the introduction, she does briefly mention her own beliefs. She does tend to fall under the rule of 3 and the Wiccan Read. If that's going to bother you, don't read it. And instead of going through page by page, I'm just going to show you the table of contents. She has spells broken up into purpose, so any type of spell you could ever want would probably be in here. Now, I don't use these as a cookie cutter recipe because to me, if you take them and change them, it does a couple of things. 1, it makes it more powerful. 2, it makes it harder for somebody else to reverse the spell because they don't know exactly what you have done. But spells like these in books are great to take and use as more of an outline to create your own spells. You can see that she does everything from animal spells to cleansings to banishings, necromancy, vampires. She has spells for divinations, happy homes, healing, hexes. Basically anything that you could think of will probably be in this book. Additionally, she also has a formulary section because a lot of the spells will have oils or maybe even an incense blend that you would need. If you don't know how to make it, you would reference this and she'll teach you how to make it. Again, this is not necessarily a book that you need, but I think it's great to have as a reference guide because it's something you can continue to use in your practice. All right, our last book is The Year of the Witch, Connecting to Nature Seasons Through Intuitive Magic by Temperance Alden. She's also on Instagram and YouTube, and this book focuses on nature, elementals, working with the land, and of course the seasons in the wheel of the year. Something that I find to be great about this book is that a lot of times when the wheel of the year is approached, it's approached from a Wiccan mindset. mindset. However, Temperance is not a Wiccan, so she doesn't approach it from that lens, which I think is very refreshing if you're someone who is not Wiccan. She talks about how to connect with the land and how to connect with elements. Of course, she also goes through Sabbats. She tells you the history of the Sabbat and things that might have been traditionally done. And she also lists some modern, simple ways that you can celebrate today. This is a relatively short read, and I think this would be great for you if you're wanting to connect with the land more, or the Wheel of the Year, or even elementals. Obviously, this is a big part of folk magic, which is why I'm including it in this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed my recommendations, and like I said, if you have different thoughts on these books or other recommendations, feel free to put those in the comments below. And as always, I hope that everybody watching this is having a great day. If nobody's told you, I love you, and I will see you guys in the next video.